Welcome to our posts. Today, we will see stories of r/Pettyrevenge. I grew up, only girl with 7 teenage boys. So, I lived in a 2-story family house in my early teens. We lived downstairs, my mom, my stepdad, and 3 older brothers. Upstairs was 2 parents, with 4 boys too, so there was a lot of testosterone in the air, to be frank. So, we lived with sharing rooms. The boys shared 2 rooms. I was stuck in the middle with a very, very small space, 5 or 6 kVm. While their rooms looked and smelled awful, I made sure to keep my small, personal space very neat and tidy. I also invested in a full TV setup with a quite large TV mid-late 90s. I found out that if I was away, my brothers would use my room to be disgusting in. As if the rest of the house wasn't enough, they would use my bed, my TV and VHS, and just lay there jerking off, sweating and smoking and scratching their balls and crap. So one day I found out that they would also use my room to bring a girl once in a while. Flash forward to me, on my knees making my bed with a thin spreadsheet with about 250 flat-headed push pins under it, covering the entire 90-200 mattress, and then I left for school. Later the next day, I got a call from my mom. She had a very hard time trying not to laugh too much, while telling me that my one brother had been working hard to get with this girl from school. She knew he was a FB, but gave him a shot. The shot was in my room, on my bed, on a needle mattress. No human was harmed, but no one ever used my room after that. My brother says 25 years later he still checks his chairs, etc., just to make sure there's no needles. Edit. First of all, wall. I did not expect this kind of I like your first post. Thanks. There are a bit of questions. I've tried to answer most of them. To be clear, my brothers and I are getting on great in 2024. My petty move was way back in the 90s, and a lot of crap went down back then. I could tell a few more great petty stories. Next story. Breakup satisfaction. My ex and I were together for 6 years, engaged for 3 months, and then he broke up with me. I remember crying in disbelief. He looked at me and said, "Look at you. No wonder nobody likes you. No wonder you have no friends." Those words were ringing in my head when my friends and I went back to the apartment to pack my stuff up. Aside from nearly everything being mine, from the silverware to the shower curtain, I really wanted to mess with him. He was a bit of a clothes horse, so I went through his closet and all his favorite shirts. I took a razor blade and frayed the thread on the 3rd or 4th button down, enough that it would hang on for a wash or 2, then pop off. His blue jeans got the same treatment: a seam here, a button there, the crotch frayed to split the next time he bent over. I doubt he ever figured out that it was me, but my girlfriends and I still laugh about it. P.S. That breakup was the best thing that ever happened to me. I've been happily married going on 15 years now with a great kid. Thanks, V. Next story. Refused to allow me to go to the bathroom? Okay then. During the 7th grade, I had a history teacher, Mr. G, that wouldn't really let students go to the bathroom after he put large restrictions on bathroom usage. I was kind of pissed, but there wasn't anything that I could do about it. So one day during class, I just really had to fart. I didn't want to do it in class, so I asked Mr. G if I could do it in the bathroom, but he wouldn't let me. I asked him again, but he just told me to sit down. Little old me was pretty mad that my teacher was putting restrictions on my bladder. I was so mad that I did as he told me to. However, before I did, I asked him one more time, and he still dismissed me, so I went to my desk, and then I farted. It was glorious. It was the most gaseous and loudest fart I had ever let out, and after I farted, people had to cover their noses with their shirts because it was so smelly. Even Mr. G did, and everyone in the room was so disgusted by what just transpired. Afterwards, with a smirk on my face, I turned to Mr. G and asked him again if I could go to the bathroom. He then blushed and said I could. And after that day, during next period, he lifted the restrictions. TL Doctor, in 7th grade, I had a history teacher that never let anyone went to the bathroom. So I farted one of the worst, gaseous farts I ever had in my life, and he was forced to change his mind. Next story. Steal my stuff, I'll steal your door. A friend of mine had issues with one of his neighbors. They were noisy, continuously drunk or stoned. Believed they were untouchable, stole really minor things like potted plants, bins, benches, garden furniture, basically anything that was easily moved and not screwed down. After many times of lifting the fence panels up and taking back the items that they took, he got annoyed with the balls on them and the lack of any real police response. Middle of the summer, they had a habit of having parties, loud music till all hours, and generally scum roaming round the local area causing trouble. My mate had nipped home during his break and noticed that the front door was open and one of the parties was going on in the rear of the house. At that time, he worked as a day laborer for independent carpenter. A plan was hatched. They opened the rear doors of their plain white van. He ran over with an impact driver and proceeded to remove the screws from the hinges and steal the door and throw it in the van and drive off. Plan accomplished, they dumped the door in an on-site skip. When he returned that evening, the door was still missing. Was replaced the next morning with a pallet with a mattress stuck behind it. Eventually, someone probably stole a piece of chipboard, and that was screwed in place. Next story. Closed door means D&D. So I work in an office. It's pretty busy, but my office door stays open most of the time, and I get lots of people walk by and interrupt my day, asking questions or just shooting the crap. I'm behind on my workload because of some unplanned delays. I mention this to my boss and say that I'm closing the door for a few hours to get stuff done without interruption. Enter Sally. Sally's reaction to a closed door is to knock and open it, a minor inconvenience, so she proceeds to do this to me a couple of times because her tasks are linked to the fires I've spent the morning fighting. Every time she does this, my train of thought gets derailed and I have to waste time getting back into my rhythm. She left the door ajar after finishing talking to me, so I got up and walked over to the door to close it. I turned the latch on the doorknob, meaning I'm now locked in my office. Sweet piece. Sure enough, a few minutes later, here comes Sally. Knock, knock. Handle turns a lot less than she's used to, and she shoulders her way into the door. The thought of her impacting my door is quite satisfying. I'm sure she will have something to say later, but that can wait for another day. Next story. Island Revenge. My ex-best friend was a full-blown grandiose narcissist. I'm talking about someone who refers to herself unironically as an alpha. She's a dive instructor, and she was given the nickname Hitler in her dive school, and she was proud of that. She's very charismatic, and has created a small cult around her on the island she works on. These people are anyway cut off from the rest of the world, and every year when I visit the island, I've seen them getting more and more in her service, and the ones who don't fall in line become social pariahs. It's a small island with few permanent residents, and no one wants to be socially isolated, so they toe her line. Well, today an old dean of mine reached out to me. She knows I'm an active diver, and she wanted some advice on who to dive with on this island as she's planning a trip. Now, for over the last decade, I have been steadily channeling work Alpha's way. I did the math, and thanks to me, over the years, 14 people have dived with her, my friends and family, and at least 6 of those have been repeat customers. Diving is an expensive hobby, and she's made a pretty package through me. She also gets commissions on accommodation, etc. when people book through her. Despite all this, she has behaved very unprofessionally with me on my last several trips, doing things like screaming at me in the dive shop or on the boat in front of other people, and one time even kicking me off the boat for someone else because she double booked. Totally unprovoked and totally unprofessional. It's almost like she was testing how far she could push me. Well, she pushed me too far, I snapped and ended the relationship. So I sent my dean a detailed email about the best dive schools, where to stay, where to eat, how to get around, etc. I ranked Alpha's dive school 3rd in my list, a ranking TripAdvisor agrees with. and I left a small note at the bottom: if you do dive there, steer clear of this instructor. It's not much, but I feels good. After 10 plus years of championing someone and getting treated like crap in return, it felt like a victory. Next story. I can't pick my neighbors, but I can pick their lock. Back in the far-off days of 02, I lived in a duplex. The people in the other half of the duplex complained to the landlord all the time for nothing. As in, I was once woken up at 2 a.m. by my landlord calling to say that the neighbors reported me having a crazy loud party and keeping them awake. I was sleeping. I was alone. There were no lights on, there was nothing making noise. Well, I do snore. Basically, she complained about both petty and made up things constantly. There's your background. So, on the property was a shed with a landlord-supplied electric lawn mower. I mowed my half one day and thought, what the hell, let's do their half too. However, the cord didn't reach to their whole yard from my outlet, so I plugged into their outlet for the last 10% of their side of the lawn. Next day, she threw a fit at me that I used her electricity. A long fit. A loud fit. I pretty much shook my head, threw my hands up, and walked away from it. I used pennies of your electricity to mow your lawn. I don't even expect gratitude. It's a small, unasked favor, but why bite my head off over it? Next day, she's got someone on her side installing those clear boxes over her 2 outlets, with padlocks on them. Clearly a normal response. Petty revenge begins here. I take a gander when she's not home. Those locks are clearly the cheapest locks they could find at Walmart. I go to Walmart and buy 2 identical ones. They were like $6. One of my hobbies is lockpicking. I'm absolutely not a master. I'm probably not even good. But I sure as heck can open the cheapest padlocks ever made in seconds. I replaced the locks with my own. Looks exactly the same. Took a few weeks, but looking out my window one day to see her with an overgrown lawn and hearing her futilely slamming a hammer against the clear boxes for a half hour made all the frustration worthwhile. Next time, shut up and take the favor. Next story. Tasty sweets for my bully. This goes back decades to when I was 7 or 8 at school. In those days, you could buy sherbet that with fruit flavors in fruit-shaped plastic. So an orange-shaped and colored one for orange flavor, etc. I used to get one of these quite often and eat at break. One kid, I'll call him Jeff Smith, always bothered me to share it with him. I usually ended up having to run away or hide or other things. He never took no for an answer and would threaten me. One Xmas we brothers and I all got a Snoopy soap, shaped like Snoopy Off, and it seemed too cool to use as soap. But one day the connection between shapes gave me an idea. I grated Snoopy a bit and put Snoopy flakes into one of the plastic containers and took it to school. Next day I got pestered by Jeff again and threatened, so I gave in. I handed him orange Snoopy and said, "Just have a little bit." He tipped out almost all the contents into his hand and threw it in his mouth. Looked very smug for about 1 second, then ran off. I was pleased with this, but then by lunchtime was being asked, "Did you poison Jeff Smith?" So had to keep explaining to classmates. End of lunchtime, I was called into the headmaster's office. This was serious. He was a scary and serious man. "What happened with you and Smith? This is UK in the 70s. We were all surnames to him. He claims you poisoned him," he asked. I just explained he kept badgering me, so I ground up soap and told him to only have a little bit, and while I spoke, the strangest thing happened. His mouth kept twitching slightly at the edges. This was a scary, authoritarian figure to me, but I just carried on explaining, resigned to whatever my fate would be. At the end, he said, in a strange voice, "I see. Don't do it again," and ushered me out of the room very quickly. I was surprised not to be disciplined, but hey, I'm not stupid. I left. He was working so bloody hard not to just burst out laughing. I like to think that story got told to other teachers. Jeff never bothered me again, after literally washing his mouth out with soap. Ida, I don't want this used posted elsewhere, thanks. Just wanted to repay this subreddit for all the petty laughs it has given me. Next story. Petty meets pettier. During my college days, I was in a club with a girl who clearly wasn't fond of me and my friends. There was this one club event where said girl was in charge of ordering and writing our names on each lunch. Suspiciously, when the food arrived, my lunch was the only one mysteriously absent. While everyone else was still busy with the event and I was close to crying, lol, my then boyfriend stepped in and rescued the situation by discreetly swapping my missing lunch with someone else's one of the girl's guy friends. As me and my friends happily ate, I could practically feel her eyes burning into me. There was nothing she could do without exposing her own petty act. Next story. Salted the garden. This was many years ago when I was in middle school. I lived with my dad part-time as a child of divorce. His girlfriend, L, agreed to move in if he bought a bigger house with 3 bedrooms because she wanted a guest bedroom. The house had a master bedroom, my dad and his girlfriend's, and 2 other bedrooms. One was about 50% bigger than the other, and the little one was pink with ballerina wallpaper border. L decided that the bigger room had to be the guest bedroom, and I got the tiny ballerina room. I fought and lost. I had to get a twin-size bed because the room could not hold a queen and a homework desk. I hated it. Worst of all, L had a dog that always had fleas. When I was at my mom's, L let her dog sleep in my bed, so I got fleas. I complained, I fought, I lost. I had always been a good kid, no trouble, straight A's, hall monitor, a real goody 2 shoes, but this pushed me over the limit. L planted 2 very fancy gardens, one for vegetables and one for flowers. She spent a lot of money on the flowers and was really into them. So I got the salt we used for when the driveway gets icy and began working into the dirt in her garden. Everything died. Nothing grew. A year later, she planted more fancy flowers and veggies, so I salted the earth again. Nothing grew again. L and my dad broke it off before year 3, but I already had my salt ready. She never knew it was me. Neither did my dad. I wish I had done more, but once she was gone, I moved into the bigger room and burned the flea-ridden mattress. Next story. Don't hold the lift, okay? Then I'll waste your time. This happened just now as I was getting home. It was raining and I had no umbrella, so I want to get back to my house to dry off. Well, a delivery guy beat me inside the building and managed to be 5 seconds ahead of me and stepped into the elevator and pressed the close door button, knowing that I was right behind him, pretty much closing the doors in my face. So, there I stood, wet, tired, and now mildly angry. That's when I decided that going home can wait. Petty revenge was more important. If I had to wait for the elevator, then so does he. I noticed he got off on the 24th floor, so I called the elevator back and stepped inside. I pressed all the buttons on the way up. I got off on my floor and waited for it to inevitably stop on the 24th floor. Then, knowing he was on his way down, I called the elevator so it would stop one more time. I don't care that I wasted some more of my time, but knowing that I wasted his in return gave me a little satisfaction. Next story. Helping my friend's custody battle. I'm not sure if this is actually petty revenge, straight up revenge, or just justice. So my friend went through a nasty divorce, and he lost a lot. Anyhow, he was in a very bad custody battle for his daughter. The judge was very biased. My friend showed pictures of her place with weed and other drug paraphernalia on her coffee table when he picked his daughter up during the court case. The judge told him and his crappy lawyer at the time he had no right to take pictures in her house. His crappy lawyer said nothing, and he got reprimanded for his outburst. After he told myself and other friends of this, we all pooled money together to get him a better lawyer. That lawyer petitioned for another judge. Here's where my petty revenge came in. I have a coworker who is dirty as hell. He sees escorts all the time and brags about them at work. He shows pictures and videos of all the escorts he sees. My coworker has hidden cameras all over his apartment. I normally don't care about my coworker's escapades, But one day, my coworker kept bothering about his new super hot escort, so cave and look at his new video. Lo and behold, it's my friend's ex. I tell my coworker I'd like a copy of the video. He had no shame and sent it to me. I forwarded it to my friend, but his new lawyer says it's just a sex video with no context. They need proof of her escorting. So I went back to my coworker and asked how he met her, and he gave me her Lealist ad. My friend's lawyer said he needed more because anyone can post an ad. So, through myself and other friends, we pooled enough money for a pie. It took 2 months, but we got enough evidence of her escorting and dealing drugs with her crappy new BF. He has full custody now, and she is in jail, not for escorting or dealing but for child abuse and neglect. Next story. Enjoy your princess cake. Me 30F and my male cousin were born in July in the same week. My aunt was really cheap, so she would cry over how difficult their economic circumstances were and how she couldn't afford a birthday party for my cousin. My mom, being a kind-hearted woman, agreed to have a conjoint party for my cousin, and since the attendees were mostly family. My aunt's idea of a conjoint party was taking all the credit and asking for gifts while contributing as little as possible. Think bringing a pack of paper plates and napkins. On the first shared birthday, my mother decorated everything in clowns since it was a gender-neutral and kid-friendly option. I was a little bit blindsided on why my cousin was put next to me when they brought out the cake and were singing happy birthday, since when my brothers had their cakes, they didn't have to share with anybody else. Next birthday, it happened again, and I started to feel bad. My cousin was way more popular than me, had a lot of friends that were coming to the shared birthday party, and instead of being my special day, it felt like I was the one interrupting his birthday. Next year comes around and 8-year-old me decides to throw a tantrum. I want a princess party. I cried until I got my mom to decorate with pink balloons, had a Disney princess in the paper invitations, and the best part, a pink, girly birthday cake in front of me and my cousin. It was a bit awkward, but at least I got to feel like a princess in my day. You would think having your guests singing happy birthday to your kid in front of a princess cake will be enough for you to bring your own cake to a shared birthday party. But have I mentioned my aunt was cheap? She had money to pay for a private school for his children and go on annual trips to the beach, but was too poor for a birthday celebration. For my 9th birthday, I decided to don't ask for any special decorations, no pink balloons this time, so that year my aunt could pretend it was his boy's birthday party. Until my mom brought my Barbie birthday cake to the table. I didn't even like Barbies at that point. I just asked for the girliest cake I could think of to embarrass my cousin. For my 10th birthday, I was thinking about what other unabashedly feminine cake I could ask for until my mom told me she wasn't doing shared birthdays anymore. I hope you guys like this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share, and subscribe the channel. Our posts